Hello, listeners. This week's episode delves into the freedoms, emotions, and sinister happenings of college life. The file itself is old and one I found recently, but nonetheless, it holds secrets we have yet to understand. So strap in tight. The trials are about to begin. Hello, listeners. My name is Professor Dantes Finch, and welcome to the Nightmare Trials. Okay.
Carter, you fucking dick. Get your ass back here. I'm gonna sue you for sexual assault, you prick.
What a damn idiot. I can't believe he would do that to us.
Yeah, no shit. That guy is an asshole and a misogynistic pig. You know, we should be able to have boobs and not have to worry about some idiot coming up and trying to cop a feel whenever he wants to. I would have thought we were evolved enough as humans to understand that that isn't okay.
College boys, you know. All full of hormones and a frontal cortex that is still developing. It really is a wonder that we are even attracted to them.
I'm thinking about switching sides.
Girl, I will switch with you. We can live together, collect cats, and make men's lives hell. You know, fulfill the whole stereotype.
You had me at cats and making men's lives hell. Viv, let's grab a drink and get the hell out of here. I think I'm only good for one unwanted advance tonight.
Megan and Vivian, also known as Viv, make their way through the crowded frat house to the line for the 3 cakes. There were so many people at the party, and that was to be expected. It was the end of the fall semester, and everyone was ready to let off some built-up stress from finals. And Sigma Tau Omega was always the place to get that done. They threw the best parties, and if you were a woman, there wasn't even a charge to get in. The reason behind that was clear, and if the stories were true, the guys here didn't have any problem getting laid at every party they threw. Not only that, but the police never showed up to the party, even when underage drinking had been reported or if a noise complaint was issued. The reason behind that was unclear, but most suspected it had to do with money and the fact that most of the police force was comprised of the past fraternal brothers. So, this spot always had a pass, and because of it, they threw the loudest and best parties. As the 2 girls walked through the crowded frat house, they passed by 3 beer pong tables, all of which were full. On one of the walls was a bracket full of team names. Meg thought about the game a bit. She always wanted to play, but the rules had become way too overcomplicated. There were bounces, rims, behind the back, and every other weird-ass thing you could think of that would take away cups for seemingly no reason. It should just be a simple shoot-and-go type of game, but lead it to a bunch of dudes to make it way more complicated than needed. As they passed the pong tournament and went through the corridor towards the kitchen, Meg had noticed the girl she had in psych class getting handsy with a guy she had never met. Like, really handsy. She had him cupped in her hand and was rubbing away on the outside of his pants. He had his hand up her skirt, and from her body movements and the way the 2 were making out, they were having a real good time. She nudged Viv, and the 2 let out a chuckle and rolled their eyes. There was always a few things like this going on at every party they went to. Hell, there was one party that they went to where a circle had formed. There was loud cheering, a lot of laughter, and everyone had their cell phones out recording something. Megan had gotten curious and made her way through the growing crowd to see what was happening. She walked up only to see some girl straddling the dude, and the 2 were just going at it. right there in front of everyone. No shame, no decency, nothing. She was pretty sure that that video had circulated through the college town and even made it on some questionable sites. And now that she thought about it, she doesn't ever really remember seeing that girl around at any other parties. Megan had wondered if she had just dropped out or moved schools. The two women had made their way to the line for the kegs. Now typically the line moved pretty quick. The frat house always had 3 kegs tapped and ready to go. The new members were in charge of pouring the drinks and passing out cups to those in line. It was efficient and very quick, but the line wasn't moving at all. Viv leaned into Megan and asked,
I wonder what's happening up there. I don't think I've ever seen this line not move.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Maybe they tapped a couple of kegs and I replaced them.
Viv pulled out her phone to check the time.
Yeah, there's no way that they tapped the keg. It's past 11:56, and this party hasn't even been going on for that long.
I don't know then. I guess we just wait.
Viv craned her neck around and stood on her tippy toes trying to see past the line of people in front of her. But she had no luck. The girl only stood 5 feet 2 inches, and even on her tippy toes, she only gained a few more inches. With an annoyed sigh, she slammed her heels back down to the ground and crossed her arms.
I can't see anything, and I don't even see people coming back this way with full cups. It's like everyone just stopped.
Maybe they have some people up front doing a cake stand or something.
Maybe, but this is the longest damn cake stand of my life.
Listen, we can give it a couple of minutes, and if the line doesn't move, then I say we just turn around and go. I have some wine at my place, and we can just drink that and see what's on Netflix.
Wow, you really are leaning into this switching sides thing.
Did nudged Megan and gave her an over-exaggerated wink. Maiden smiled and blushed at the overt comment, and a twinge of butterflies unexpectedly began to flutter in her stomach. Now, she wasn't a lesbian. She knew that. She liked boys and what they had to offer physically, but she would be lying to herself if she didn't admit that she did like this in a way. She wasn't sure if it was a romantic or sexual feeling. All she did know is that she loved spending time with her. She loved her dark and long curly hair and deep brown eyes, and her smile that always made her liven right up. But she didn't think that Viv felt that way towards her. Viv was boy crazy, and usually had any man she wanted eating out of her hands. But she always seemed to suggest that their friendship may be a bit more than what it was. A flirtatious comment here, a soft touch there, and even a lingering glance at Megan when they were trying on clothes. Maybe tonight would be the night for Megan to see if things could go further with them. She could give it the good old college try. They could finish a bottle of wine, and maybe the conversation they would be having would lead to a hand touch. One errant curl would be pushed away from Vid's face. They would look into each other's eyes and get lost. Then one thing could lead to another, and a soft kiss would happen. A caress of the body, a probing touch on the thigh. Megan felt herself starting to get flush and her body temperature raised. She'd let out a breath and pursed her lips together as she thought to herself.
What am I even thinking about here? It's Viv. There is no way in hell that any of this would happen. I'm just playing scenarios in my head that will never come true, and I'm not even sure that I like girls like that. I probably just need to get laid. That has to be it. It's been way too long, and because of it, I'm fantasizing about my best friend.
Megan was pulled from her thoughts as Dib pulled at her arm. She looked over to see her on her tippy toes again and staring off in the distance towards the kitchen, a concerned look now on her face.
Viv, what's going on?
You didn't hear that?
Hear what? I don't hear anything at all.
Megan looked around at everyone in the line with her. There was a murmur in the crowd, and more concerned faces looked past her towards the kitchen. Some people at the back of the line started to turn and leave, heading back towards the beer pong room.
Viv, what do you hear?
I'm surprised you didn't hear it. It sounded like a girl screaming or something towards the front of the line, but it was cut off, and there was a ton of gasps.
Maybe someone got hurt then, and maybe that is why the line hasn't been moving? What time is it now?
Div planted back down on her heels and pulled out her phone to check the time.
Yeah, maybe something like that happened, but we have been in this line for 6 minutes. It's 12:01.
Let's just leave then. It's obvious we aren't getting any drinks here tonight. We can go back to my place and just have a shut-in night.
Looking slightly annoyed, Vivian put her phone in her back pocket and started shaking her head up and down.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, but I Wonder what the fuck is happening up there.
No sooner than when Viv got the words out, more screams erupted from the front of the line. Megan heard them this time. It was 2 at first, then 4. Megan watched as the line of people in front of her began to turn around and make their way back, panic and terror on their faces. She heard someone scream out to run, and without even thinking, she grabbed Vivian by the arm, pulled her around, and started to make a dash back the way they came in. They pushed by 20 or more people, some of which beginning to turn and run with the women. They passed the beer pong tables and entered into a large, open live-in area, only to see mobs of bodies trying to leave the frat party. More and more panic screams filtered into the room from behind them. They mixed with the malfrantic and angry cries of the people in front of them. Megan saw a man pick up a chair and rush towards the window. He reared back and slammed the chair into the glass as hard as he could, but nothing happened. The chair bounced off the window and vibrated into the man's body, causing him to drop it to the ground. She looked towards the front doors of the frat and saw a group of people trying as hard as they could to slam their bodies into the door and open it, but it didn't budge. Fear now creeping its way throughout her, Megan turned to Viv, her look asking her what they should do. But Viv didn't answer, and she never had the time to answer. 1 second she was right there staring back at Megan with the same look of fear and confusion on her face, and then the next second her head exploded into a million pieces. Blood, brain, tissues, and bones splattered everywhere, hitting Megan in the face and getting into her open mouth. The shock of what she just witnessed made her freeze in place. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. It was all a bad dream, one that she would wake up from any minute now. Megan slammed her eyes shut and began to will herself awake. She felt as dozens of people began to rush past her, brushing up against her and knocking her off balance. She fell to the floor and curled up into the fetal position, doing her best to protect her head and cover her body as more and more people rushed by. With her eyes still shut tightly, she felt whiteness begin to fall around her like hot rain. Then the acrid and metallic smell of blood wafted into her nose. The crowd around her was getting more and more frantic. A foot kicked her in the side and she heard a thump as someone tripped over her down body. She had to get up. She had to get away from the stampede of people, or else she would be trampled to death. Megan opened her eyes only to see the body of Viv lying next to her. Her once beautiful hair, now almost nearly gone, thick and matted and singed to her scalp. Only one of her deep, penetrating brown eyes stared back at her. It looked as if half her head had been taken off, the skin black and blistered like overdone meat from a grill. Megan let out a scream and pushed herself upright against the fleeing people around her. She gripped the side of her face and began to breathe heavily. That is when she noticed that more bodies riddled the floor, some with their heads completely gone, others with giant holes in their torsos. They looked like gunshot wounds, but she couldn't remember ever hearing a shot ring out. There was a crackling noise around her, like electricity surging. The lifeless bodies on the ground began to twitch and convulse. She looked over at Viv only to see her body arch backwards in an inhuman way and pulsating up and down. Blood squirted from her open head wound as if her heart were beginning to beat with every electrical shockwave that raced through her. Megan felt the hair on her arm begin to rise. She turned to the group of people still trying to break through the front of the door and windows. She noticed the hair on everyone else's head was now floating, like they were in an anti-gravity chamber. Realization hit her. This was some electrical issue with the building. Something was causing surges of high-powered energy to shoot out and through people. Megan collapsed to the ground and made her body as small as she could, grasping her knees through her chest and falling over to her side. What sounded like a discharge shot by her and a flurry of screams broke out. Viv's body fell to the ground next to her, once again lying still. And Megan took this as her chance. She jumped up to her feet and ran towards the stairs at the other end of the room. She knew from past experience that this would lead to the bedrooms. Rushing as fast as she could up the stairs, she began to hear the noise again. From the corner of her eyes, she saw the bodies on the ground begin to convulse and shake. She did notice, though, that the hair on her arms did not rise this time. Whatever was causing this to happen was only at the ground level. She had reached the top of the landing and burst through the first door she saw. She slammed the door behind her, and muffled screams of more people erupted. She put her hands over her ears and sat there in silence, tears streaming down her face. Another discharge sound and more screams. Then another discharge sound and screams. Then another discharge sound and no screams. Megan's eyes opened.
Are they all dead?
Another sound followed by silence.
I have to be dead.
Another discharge.
What am I supposed to do? I have to get out of here.
She looked around the room, searching for a window, but there were none. Then she remembered that there was a small window in the upstairs bathroom, and if she remembered correctly, it was perched over the back deck pergola, and was probably big enough for her to squeeze through. Another sound. She had to get out of there. Megan slowly rose to her feet and reached for the door handle, when she heard what sounded like footsteps coming up the stairs. They sounded clumsy, almost like the person coming up them was drunk. Or maybe they were hurt and needed her help. She ripped open the door and looked down the stairwell, and her heart stopped coming up the stairs. With her body lazily slumped against the wall was Viv, her clothes now charred away from her body and her skin peeling from her bones. The one eye she had left staring at Megan with murderous intent, in her jaw opening and closing as if she was yelling at her. And now, appearing behind her, were dozens of people, all in varying states of ruin from the electrical blast that coursed through them just moments earlier. Megan didn't hesitate. She turned to the hallway and began to run as fast as she could. She knew the bathroom was halfway down the hall and to the right. She tried the first door she thought was the right one, but it didn't open. She could hear sounds coming from the inside, a bed creaking and a woman moaning, and a man's voice ringing out.
Yo, fuck off. We're a little busy in here.
Megan moved to the next door and tried it, but it was also locked. Then she heard something at the end of the hallway where she just came from and watched as Div's undead corpse rounded the corner. She stood there swaying from side to side and staring back at Megan. What was left of her head lolled to the side and twitched back up as if she were trying to keep it upright herself. Megan began to cry seeing the woman she thought she was in love with like this. She cried for the memories they had together, the memories that were now ruined by the horror that was in front of her. She cried for the inability to tell her how she really felt. But most of all, she cried for the loss of Vivian as a whole. Her charming and outgoing personality was no more. It had been replaced by whatever she was now. More and more figures began to shuffle in behind her as Megan's heart felt as if it would beat right out of her chest. She could feel the panic rising within her as her fight or flight started to kick in. And then the door she had just tried previously swung open, and out walked a half-dressed frat boy. He stopped when he saw her, a look of confusion and caution on his face.
Hey, are you okay? Did one of those assholes slip you some drugs or something?
He took a few steps towards Megan, his hands out as if to say everything is okay, and he was here to help. Megan saw the woman who was with him walk out of the room, and she stopped dead in her tracks, looking the opposite direction. Her screams echoed down the hallway as sounds of rushing feet reverberated back in response. The frat boy turned around to see what was happening, and he quickly started to shuffle backwards towards Megan, tripping and falling. The girl at the same time turned to run, but due to her now down lover, her feet tangled in his, and she too fell to the floor. Megan watched in abject horror as a slew of the burnt dead rushed lazily down the hall. She left the door she had just been trying to open and moved down the hall to try the next one. It too was locked. She glanced over towards the oncoming mass of bodies and saw as a handful of the monsters plowed down and into the downed couple. Their screams bounced off the walls as teeth and fingernails pierced their skin. Flesh was being rended from their bones. And one of the creatures screamed out in a joyous plea as it pulled up and held one of the couple's intestines high into the air. It bit into the intestine, causing it to rupture, bile and shit all down the front of its face. Its eyes rolled into the back of its head in ecstasy as it chewed and devoured the girl's innards. More and more of the dead piled onto the couple and began to feast. Slowly their cries of pain and panic died out as they slipped from the living. All Megan could hear now was the sound of eating, lips smacking, growling, and muscle tearing. She was frozen in place, and she thought that if she moved, it would trigger the dead to notice her and attack. If she just stood still, maybe they would finish their meal and just go away. She controlled her breathing to lessen the noise she was making, and she watched wide-eyed as Viv slowly emerged from around the feasting monsters on the ground. Tears once again began to fall down Megan's face, and she started to walk backwards slowly, her hand running down the hallway wall. Viv's head twitched from side to side and her teeth clacked together as her pace quickened towards Megan. Megan's hand left the wall and found another door, one without a handle. Where the handle should be, there was a metal plate. This had to be the bathroom she was looking for. She pushed on the door and it swung open. With her eyes locked on the rapidly approaching Vivian, she hurried her way through the door and pushed it shut. Once inside, she knew she had to move fast. Without a doorknob to latch the door shut, it would be nothing for Vivian to make her way in. Megan rushed towards the 4-foot by 4-foot window. The bottom seal stood flush with her chin, meaning that once the window was open, she would have to hoist herself up and clamber out onto the pergola below. She looked for a latch or a hinge that would allow for her to open it, but there wasn't one. It was just a solid glass window pane utilized for natural lighting and nothing more. She looked around the bathroom, frantically trying to find anything that she could use to bust the window open and allow for her to escape. She paused as she heard what sounded like footsteps heading her way. They weren't moving fast, but they were most assuredly moving in her direction. In a full panic now, Megan looked down at the toilet and ripped off the top tank cover, the weight of it not even registering to her now, as the adrenaline in her body caused her to gain a strength she didn't know she even had. She ran towards the window and swung the tank with a baseball bat. With a crash, the window and ceramic lid exploded, sending glass shrapnel everywhere. The bathroom door swung open, and in the door frame stood the charred remains of Vivian. Megan scrambled towards the window and jumped up. She extended her hands up and out of the hole, with her head and body following behind her. Her midsection landed hard on the frame, and a shooting pain exploded throughout her abdomen. She coughed, and a spray of blood flew from her mouth. She hadn't checked to see if all the glass had broken before she tried to make her escape. She looked towards her stomach and saw blood pouring out and streaming down the side of the frat house. She tried to lift her body up, but her awkward ankle didn't provide her with much leverage. She was effectively stuck. She tried to push forward to break the glass, but it was no use. As fragile as the window pane had been, the small fragments that were now embedded in her stomach were much stronger, and with every push forward, she felt the glass begin to rip her innards more and more. She was going to die here, stuck in a window and devoured by the dead remains of the woman she loved. She looked out towards the back courtyard of the fraternity, and 12 hooded and cloaked figures stared back up at her. She screamed for them to help, but they were unmoving. She wriggled and squirmed more and more, trying to break herself free. She wondered to herself why they weren't helping her, why they were watching her stuck up here. Megan howled out in pain as she felt teeth bite down on the back of her calf. She began to kick and scream, but whatever had her had a tight grip on her leg. She felt the searing heat as the muscle on the back of her leg began to tear away from her body. Then she felt hands grip her other leg and pull. She let out more and more choked screams as the tension built up in the midsection. It felt like her body was being pulled apart. Hands grabbed her waist and pulled. The 12 watched the woman in the window. They watched as she begged for their help. They watched as her blood began to pool up and out of her, streaming down the side of the house and then disappearing within its sides, almost as if it absorbed by the house itself. The woman's screams were now choked with blood as she struggled to release herself from the house of horror. Finally, the 12 heard the ripping of skin, and then they watched as the top half of her body broke free and tumbled the 6 feet to the pergola below. It bounced off the roof beams and landed with a loud splat on the concrete below. Vines extended from the house, probing the ground around it. They found and wrapped themselves around the woman, slowly dragging her towards the foundation itself. Silently, they watched as her body began to press against the house and become absorbed within its walls. Once the process was done, they turned to one another, giving each other a slight nod. Then they turned around, walking away from the house, knowing that in another 10 years, would need to feed again, and the town would prosper just as long as the house was fed.
Thank you for listening and supporting this podcast. If you would like access to the interdimensional radio station, you can search for the Nightmare Trials on Patreon. Once there, it is only $2 per month to gain access to our extra short stories and chat discussion with the professor. Your contribution helps us continue to do what we do. Further, you can go to the nightmaretrials.square.site and order merch and suggest to be a part of one of our stories. We would love nothing more than to add your name to our writings. Lastly, make sure to follow the podcast and hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. Until we meet again,